Mike was slogging through new test data, tedious but crucial task for him and his team's month-long project on the experimental vehicle. Despite the monotony, he focused on correlating and organizing the information for analysis. In the middle of this, his phone buzzed with a text notification. Initially, he ignored it, intent on finishing his current task. After a brief pause, he finally glanced at his phone and noticed the alert. His curiosity piqued. He picked up his phone, revealing an unknown number with a local area code. Though he considered dismissing it as spam, he thought it might be a colleague's unregistered number. Upon opening the message, his confusion turned to shock. An explicit image was displayed on his screen, a close-up of a woman's private parts with a small mole. He stared in disbelief, recognizing the mole as belonging to his wife, Lisa. Shock and doubt overwhelmed him as he tried to process the situation. Lisa was supposed to be on her way to Chicago for a critical work engagement. Yet here he was, confronted with an image suggesting otherwise. The message read, "Look closely. You still have time. Jackson's Bar, 6:00 p.m." It was 5:15 p.m., and Lisa's flight was scheduled to land in Chicago at 4:30 p.m. Normally, she would have checked in upon arrival, but he rationalized she might be busy with her team. Despite the turmoil, Mike decided to reply to the text before taking further action. He wrote, "Who is this? How did you get this image? Am I supposed to meet you at Jackson's?" After sending the text, he decided to head to Jackson's Bar, determined to uncover the truth. He texted Lisa, "How was your flight? I'm going out for a bite. Call me when you can." He aimed to keep things low-key and gather information discreetly. As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed again. Expecting Lisa, he checked it only to find another message from the mystery sender. "I'll be there, but you'll find someone more interesting than me." Overwhelmed, Mike hurried to his car, checking the map. Jackson's was 30 minutes away, and it was already 540. He'd arrive shortly after 6:00 p.m., hoping he wouldn't miss whoever the texter wanted him to meet. During the drive, his phone buzzed again this time, a message from Lisa Crazy Time with the team. "Call you later before bed, love you." Pushing thoughts of their conversation aside, he focused on the meeting at Jackson's. He arrived at 6:10, his heart racing as he parked. The texter hadn't given clues about who to look for, but he assumed they'd recognize him and approach. The mention of someone more interesting troubled him most. The texter seemed to know more than he did, and he feared walking into a trap. The image of Lisa's intimate parts haunted him. He trusted her completely and thought their relationship was strong. Yet someone had this image, and he was minutes away from discovering the truth, a prospect that filled him with dread. Stepping inside, he allowed his eyes to adjust to the dim lighting. Unfamiliar with the pub's layout, he paused by the entrance to survey the surroundings. A spacious dining area lay ahead with a bar to his left. Choosing a seat near the end of the bar, he ordered a draft beer and scanned the room. His attention was drawn to a man who had just taken a drink order and was heading across the room toward a table of smiling individuals. And there, at the table, receiving a drink from the well-dressed man, sat Lisa, wearing her little black dress and pearls, her smile radiant. Moving mechanically, he advanced toward the table. As Lisa noticed him, her warm smile faded to wide-eyed fear. Undeterred, he continued, determined to get answers. "I kept walking until I reached the table and grabbed the well-dressed man by the collar, yanking him backward. Drinks flew as he stumbled, crying out in pain. As he fell to the floor, I recognized him. 'Stay down, Greg!' I barked. Drenched and shocked, Greg obeyed silently. Turning to Lisa, I saw the table had gone silent. Familiar faces stared back her teammates, people who had shared dinners at our home. It struck me that team loyalty outweighed personal betrayal, except for the one who had sent the message. Briefly, I thought about finding out who it was, but I dismissed the idea. I told Lisa I was heading home and that she should come if she wanted to salvage our marriage. She nodded, but before she could move, I asked for a moment. I addressed Rachel and Jack, sitting nearby. "Rachel, does Matt think you're in Chicago? And Jack, does Sarah know you're here?" Their guilty expressions confirmed my suspicions. It was clear the whole team was in on it. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing. Inside, I grabbed a beer and slumped onto the couch, thinking about our so-called friends. I knew Matt and Sarah, but not the other couples. Unsure of what to do, I thought about calling Jack or Sarah, but decided against it. Instead, I sent a brief message: Lisa's plans changed. You might want to check in. About 20 minutes later, I heard the garage door and Lisa's car. She walked in, still in her little black dress, but minus the flashy shoes and jewelry. She sat across from me on the sofa. I stayed silent, knowing silence can be powerful. She broke first. "It's not what you think," she started, but I raised my hand to stop her. "You have no idea what I think," I replied. "I don't need an explanation. We're both engineers. We know there's no real answer to why. It's just trying to justify things. So let's keep it simple. How long? How many times? How often? Do our friends know? Who else at work knows? Am I the office joke?" "No, Mike, it's not like that," Lisa protested. "Our plans got messed up. Instead of coming home just to leave again tomorrow, Greg suggested we stay. I didn't see everyone from the team there." "Where were they?" I asked. "When we got the news, some stayed home and will meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to lie to me," I pointed out. "You seemed close to Greg. Is there something between you and the star engineer you'd like to tell me?" "Well, for starters, Greg convinced the bar not to press charges," she said, trying to stay positive. I couldn't believe her loyalty. "I don't care about Greg. If he hadn't tripped, I would have hit him. I've been in jail before. It doesn't scare me. It might even make for a good story," I added with a smirk. "Do you love him?" Lisa paused, thinking hard. I could tell she was measuring her words. Silence filled the room, and my mind raced to fill it. This wasn't going to end well. "Greg's not my boyfriend. There's nothing between us," she insisted. "I should have told you about the change, but it seemed minor. Whether I was here or in Chicago, you weren't expecting me. I was still with the team, just having dinner before going to our rooms. There was no reason for you to act like that." "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," she exclaimed, trying to cover her guilt. I pulled out my phone, brought up the text, and slid it across the table to her. Her face fell as she recognized the image. She started speaking, all pretense gone. I started a voice recording app on my phone, ready to capture everything. Mike tucked the phone into his shirt pocket, preparing himself. "Mike, our team," Lisa hesitated, searching for the right words, "is very tight-knit. Most of us," she began, "have a small group that meets regularly. They were all at Jackson's. We've been putting in extra hours for the proposal. You know how much time I've dedicated to this pitch. I can't pinpoint exactly when it started, but it was after Greg became project manager. We worked closely together and things just progressed," Lisa explained. "No need for explanations," he interrupted. "Falling into bed doesn't just happen. We both know that. It's a conscious choice, so don't insult me." He paused, piecing things together. "So, almost 6 months. That's when Greg joined, right?" She nodded. "The team?" he continued. "All of you?" She nodded again. "Greg mentioned it builds trust and unity. Is that what led you all to form this alliance?" "Now you're being cynical. It's more than that. I feel a strong connection to Greg and my team more than ever," Lisa asserted confidently. He sensed trouble brewing. "Unfortunately, you may see some changes in your team soon," Mike warned. "What did you do?" Lisa gasped. "Mike, involving others will only cause more damage. Let them make their own decisions. We need to focus on us." "I can't stay silent and be complicit. I care about Mark and Sarah. In fact, I like them a lot more than Rachel and Jim right now," he replied. "I texted them about the changed plans. How they handle it with their spouses is up to them. I can live with my decision. Mike, we have the most productive team in the company's history," she practically yelled. "And you benefited too. Just because our team meetings were on Wednesdays didn't mean you missed out. I never denied you access to me whenever you needed it. So I slept with my team a bit earlier. You never noticed that picture, did you?" She sneered. "That was right after Greg finished inside me. Yes, he came inside your loving wife. What you don't see is Rachel. She took the picture just before she went down on me. Now you know. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen, right? Mike listened in shock as the extent of the deception and his own ignorance unfolded. Now, just because you're aware, just because your fragile ego is bruised, you want to throw away everything my team and I have achieved? Lisa hissed, her anger escalating. Mike could feel his heart rate rising as Lisa passionately defended her team's questionable dynamics, his own anger growing by the second. For a fleeting moment during his drive home, he had entertained the idea of possibly forgiving Greg just this once. However, that notion quickly vanished. He didn't need to hear more and certainly didn't want to, but Lisa persisted. No, sir. We won't let you off the hook. You're going to text Mark and Sarah back, telling them you heard from me and that we were stranded in Atlanta but have reservations for the morning. That's the story Rachel and Jim will stick to, and you're going to support them, damn it, she shouted. There are millions on the line with this deal, and your hurt feelings mean absolutely nothing. Send the text, and then we can discuss our next steps. Discuss our next steps? Mike retorted. There's no discussing it. You're leaving now. You and your twisted team, including your ringleader Greg, can carry on however you like. We're finished. I'll be contacting a lawyer this week to get the ball rolling. It's a straightforward 5,050 split. You keep your retirement and I'll keep mine, Mike declared. Go. You have reservations in town, use them. Head off to Chicago and chalk up another victory for you and your team. Mike, please send those texts, Lisa pleaded, her tone much softer now. If we lose Rachel or Jim before the presentation, the company could lose millions. You and I could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in commissions and bonuses. Just imagine all the places we could go with that money. Just you and me. Forget about this and reclaim my loyalty. Please, Mike, don't let some irrational concern about meaningless encounters derail us. Greg says, I'm on the fast track to executive status. All I have to do is keep delivering results for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For us? She implored. Lisa, just leave, Mike managed to say before he was struck hard in the back, knocking the wind out of him as he fell to the floor with a knee pressed into his back. Don't hurt him too much, Lisa interjected. Still undecided about breaking my nose? Greg taunted, leaning in close to Mike's face while he lay pinned on the floor. Mike thought, Lisa must have had this planned. I know whose team she's really on, Mike spat out, glaring at Greg. We'll see whose nose gets broken. Greg smirked back at him. Get his phone and type those texts. We don't have time for this nonsense. Someone yanked Mike up from the floor. He pretended to be more hurt than he was, making his captor strain to pull him up. This told Mike what he needed to know. The person was a weak office worker, wheezing from the effort. Mike was catching his breath, refocusing on the situation. In contrast to Greg and his polished team of salespeople, Mike's team worked in the field. They collaborated with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, SOAR, based in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. While Mike's group of engineers wasn't as hardcore, spending time with the crews during test missions meant they were in top physical condition, guided by seasoned operators. They designed equipment for the most dangerous missions, taking pride in their modifications that contributed to successful operations and safe returns. The members of the 160th and their formidable passengers deeply appreciated the hard work of Mike's crew, especially Master Sergeant Troy Baker, a legendary figure in their community. Everyone from rookies to high-ranking officers respected him for leading his men through missions worldwide. He was known for never leaving anyone behind, a reputation cemented during a mission in Colombia. When FARC ambushed their group, MSGT Baker saw the young LT platoon leader on the ground bleeding from a head wound. The medic declared him dead, but Baker lifted him into a fireman's carry, insisting he was coming home with them. The medic, thinking Baker had lost his mind, followed orders as they trekked back to the LZ through dense forest. Back at base, the medic watched in amazement as the dead LT's pupils contracted under a penlight, leading to emergency surgery that saved his life. Baker rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. He had a special regard for Mike and his team. During downtime between missions, he taught them basic yet effective hand-to-hand combat techniques. It's better to know something just in case, he advised. The biggest threat you might face is a paper cut or a malfunctioning copier, but you never know where you might end up. If you encounter trouble, you'll have something practical to rely on. But let's hope paper cuts remain your biggest worry. Regulating his breathing, Mike remembered Baker's lessons. Even when you're taking a beating, you can still fight back. Outsmart your attacker, Baker had said. Mike subtly resisted, wearing down his captor's strength. Greg demanded, "Give me the phone, Mike." Mike stared him down. "Now you know I've been with your wife, and every guy on the team has had their way with her. Forget this tough guy act. You're nothing but a weak, submissive nerd. Do as we say, and maybe you'll still have a chance with Lisa when the team isn't using her." Mike's anger boiled over. Recalling Baker's training, he swiftly shifted his weight and twisted, breaking free from his captor's grasp. He spun around, delivering a well-aimed punch to the office worker's gut, doubling him over. The room fell silent as Mike squared up with Greg. "Don't you ever talk about Lisa like that?" Mike snarled, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you can break me? Think again. This ends now." Greg took a step back, momentarily stunned by Mike's sudden defiance. Mike seized the opportunity, grabbing his phone and backing away, keeping his eyes on Greg. The power dynamic had shifted, and Mike was no longer the submissive engineer. He was a man determined to take control of the situation and protect what mattered most to him. With his heart pounding, Mike knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a surge of confidence. He wasn't just fighting for his pride, he was fighting for his dignity and his future. The luxuries you can enjoy with her bonus should help numb the pain. Who knows, maybe Lisa will even buy you a robotic assistant for when she's occupied, Greg taunted, relishing in Mike's humiliation. He demanded Mike's phone, spotting its outline in his shirt pocket. Greg reached for it with a smug grin. Mike reacted instantly, thrusting his heel back and striking his captor's shin, causing him to yelp and stumble. Using the moment of distraction, Mike flexed his arms and broke free from the hold. Greg's eyes widened in surprise. Mike rolled his shoulder as MSGT Baker had taught him and drove his fist into Greg's face with all his strength. The crunch of breaking bones was followed by a gush of blood as Greg crumpled to the floor. Mike spun around, spotting his assailant. It was Bill, clutching his leg and whimpering about a broken foot. Mike stomped on his foot, eliciting a scream from Bill. "That should clear things up," Mike muttered. Turning back, he saw Greg on the floor, hands covering his bloody face, trying to get up. Mike leaned down and hissed in Greg's ear, "Looks like your nose took the hit. Not willing to take one for the team?" He then delivered a knockout punch to Greg's temple. Adrenaline coursing through him, Mike scanned the room for Lisa. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his back and neck, dropping him to one knee. He turned to find Lisa wielding a cast-iron skillet. Her swing had missed, only grazing his side. Rising, Mike roughly grabbed the skillet from her hand. "Mike, we can fix this," Lisa begged. "Think about the money. I'll end the affairs, I promise. We can go back to how it was." Rubbing his head, Mike stared at her, amazed by her quick change of tactics. She reminded him of a shape-shifting alien from a horror movie, adapting to each situation. He smirked at the thought. Misunderstanding his expression, Lisa moved to hug him. He stopped her with his left hand and after a moment struck her nose with his right. The bone cracked, but she remained conscious, crying out and slumping to the floor. "It hurts, doesn't it?" Mike said, describing the tears, blurred vision, labored breathing, and blood. "It works every time." Lisa, shocked and in pain, questioned why Mike had hit her. Unapologetic, he replied, "Because I can." He continued recording, confident he had enough evidence to justify his actions despite how it might look. Reflecting on MSGT Baker's advice about taking decisive action, Mike surveyed the room. He saw Bill's distress and Lisa's futile attempts to stop the bleeding while others remained motionless. He felt a grim satisfaction, crediting Baker for the success. Discussing the aftermath, Mike expressed frustration over the consequences for Greg and Bill, lamenting the missed opportunities and financial losses. He considered calling the police but decided to wait, wanting to question Lisa first. Kneeling beside her, he showed her how to handle the nosebleed. As his adrenaline faded, he felt exhausted. Sitting across from the woman he thought he knew, he demanded answers. "Why, Lisa? What were you trying to achieve?" he asked, his disappointment evident. Lisa admitted it could have worked if Mike had supported her. She regretted the incident's fallout. Mike pressed on, questioning their future and the likelihood of more deceit. Lisa conceded the possibility and hinted at further dishonesty. Mike learned that Greg had warned Lisa about Mike's rigid morals and idealistic views, advising her to break away to succeed. When Mike asked when Greg had given this advice, Lisa retorted, implying Mike was clueless about many aspects of her relationship with Greg. Despite Mike's silence, Lisa kept talking, sharing her views on career advancement and their shattered plans. She revealed that following Mike's advice for career advancement had only yielded a few commendations. It wasn't until Rachel offered guidance that Lisa learned what really worked for women in the workplace. Lisa asserted that engaging in sexual relationships for career advancement was not only effective but also more enjoyable. Mike, still recording the conversation, processed this new information, curious about the timeline of Lisa's actions. "Did you start this before Greg came into the picture?" Mike asked. Lisa, growing impatient with his questions, disclosed that she had begun such activities at the company's Christmas party a year after joining. She emphasized her commitment to this approach ever since. "Wait, you're sleeping with the boss too? Art Vanderlei?" Mike asked incredulously. "Yes, Mike. Art, Greg, Bill, anyone on the team who could help my career. It doesn't cost me anything to share some intimacy. It's easy to manipulate you men when I can lead you around by your desires, especially you. A bit of cleavage and you'd follow me anywhere," she stated smugly. "Even now, thinking you figured it all out, you have no idea. We informed Art of our location when we headed here. Right now, he's gathering the rest of the team, crafting a cover story for our absence. They'll have to make the pitch without us, but the extra effort with their purchasing managers should pay off." "Do I really want to hear this?" Mike wondered. "Oh, what the heck, why not?" "Extra effort?" he prodded. "You always were a go-getter, Lisa," he remarked sarcastically. "It was so easy. I hate to even call it effort," she laughed. "You know the old joke, the worst sex I ever had was still great? At the BITS conference, it was straightforward with the men. We had to get more creative with Brenda, the only woman on the selection board. It's funny, I can even seduce a woman. I used Greg as the kicker. She was situationally bi-curious, but that cleared up about the time my tongue started making promises." "If everything is set, why the strong-arm tactics?" Mike asked. "That was Greg's idea. The idiot thought going all alpha was smart. I told him I'd come home, please you, and catch the flight. But he had to play the tough guy. Now, instead of being the face of the winning team, I am back to dealing with Art. It's a setback, but not the end," Lisa explained. "You wouldn't have bought me so cheap," Mike retorted. "Maybe not," Lisa replied, "but I still would have made the flight." "Well, you're not making that flight now," he declared, realizing how Greg seemed so clued in. "You must have a transmitter. Art, are you listening? I'm about to call the cops. I'm sure there are a handful of felonies here, and we haven't even started on the fraud. That's a federal contract, right?" Lisa stared at Mike, realizing the gravity of the situation. "The feds take a dim view of extra effort, as you put it. I'm sure you have great lawyers, Art, but maybe there's an alternative," Mike suggested, letting it hang. Lisa's phone rang, playing hail to the chief. She answered, "Art? Of course. I'll put you on speaker," she said, turning to Mike. "First, let me apologize for Greg's actions. They were a gross lapse of judgment. The board will deal with him assertively," Art's voice came through the speaker. "Thank you, Art. It's good to see that you and the board take assault and fraud seriously," Mike replied. "These are unfortunate allegations. Lawyers will profit, but nobody wants to rock the boat. We might pay a fine. Greg and Bill get community service, but ultimately you'll be divorced and half as wealthy," Art explained in a businesslike manner. "Do I detect an alternative in this story, Art?" Mike inquired. "Tanya always said you were the clever one." "Yes, there most decidedly is an alternative. CR has displaced you in your wife's affections. When you found out and questioned it, you were treated shabbily. Instead of calling the cops, suppose we could come to an agreement," Art continued. "I just sent a snap to Tanya's phone. It should disappear after viewing. Have a look. Lisa opened the snap and showed it to Mike. He saw the words Bank of Grand Cayman and a very large number. When would that be deposited? Mike asked. It's already there. You have an email with the account number. This has been a very bad day for you, Mike. This may be a hard decision, and I don't discount the emotion. Lisa's a very desirable woman. However, one can't take emotion to the bank, can one? Art concluded. No, one can't, Mike agreed, mimicking Art's upper-crust manner of speech. CR will cover the cost of your divorce. You can never reconcile. Tanya will file asking for her personal belongings and her retirement, Art outlined. He paused for a moment, weighing his options. On one hand, he could stand on principle and expose the entire sordid mess, letting the chips fall where they may. On the other hand, Art had just given him 5 million reasons to walk away. Does CR have a medical team, Art? Mike asked. Yes, Mike, we do have some physicians on retainer, Art replied. Good, Mike said. Send a few of them over here to pick up your team. Are we in agreement then? Art asked. Tanya, Mike replied firmly. Precisely, Art agreed. Are we done, Art? Mike asked. Goodbye, Art, Mike said, and ended the call. He put his phone away, turned off the recording app, and slipped it back into his pocket. I knew you would see it our way, Mike. We can still be friends. Friends with benefits when this is all over, Lisa said, summoning what she thought was her most winning smile. But even her radiant smile couldn't undo the damage to her ruined nose. Her eyes were turning black, and dried blood crusted under her nose, trailing down to her chin. Mike found the sight comical and allowed himself a small smile. Once again, Lisa misread his smile as agreement and leaned in to kiss him. Mike extended his right hand, halting her and gently pushing her back until she landed on the couch with a thud. Why would I want to kiss you? He asked, his disdain evident. Lisa, hurt, looked up at him. You need to get your things and be gone by tomorrow, Mike insisted. Walking toward the door, he stopped beside Bill, who was still clutching his injured foot. How's the foot? Mike asked dismissively. Then he kicked Bill in the groin, causing him to curl up and moan in agony. Approaching Greg, who had managed to sit up, Mike said, I won't hit you again. Greg looked relieved, but his relief quickly turned to pain as Mike's foot pressed into his groin, making Greg collapse in agony. Mike walked out of the room, got into his car, and drove off. He didn't know where he was going, but food and shelter were his immediate needs. He grabbed a burger from a drive-thru, checked into a Red Roof Inn just outside of town near the freeway, and fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Despite the physical strain from the previous night's events, he rose early the next morning and reluctantly got out of bed. As he made coffee in the motel room, his phone chimed. Eagerly, he grabbed it and read the text message from an unknown number. Sorry about yesterday. Can we meet at TGIF at the mall? I'll wave you over to seats at the bar. It'll be there. Mike replied, sure, and poured the lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. Determined, he set up his laptop, gearing up for some online banking. Reflecting on his college days before his relationship with Lisa, he recalled his economics professor's advice to maintain an offshore account for unforeseen circumstances. With his professor's help, he had established a bank account in the Cayman Islands, which he fondly referred to as his go-to-hell fund. Over the past decade, he had diligently contributed to it, and now it boasted nearly $50,000. Mike felt a sense of pride knowing his fund was about to receive a significant boost. He accessed the secure website for his bank, and with a few keystrokes, he transferred the bulk of Art's payment into his personal account, leaving $100,000 in the original account. After a shower and a change of clothes, he headed out to meet the mystery texter. Mike entered TGIF just past noon and immediately noticed a man waving him over. The man appeared to be around Mike's age, well-dressed and handsome. Mike approached him. I believe you sent me a text, Mike said as he sat down. I'm sorry for how it turned out. I didn't know a clean way to tell you, the stranger began. Why don't you start with who you are and your connection to Lisa? Mike replied. I was on the team. I left the Army after 8 years, wounded in action, and had a lengthy recovery before being medically discharged. I joined CR about 6 months ago and was assigned to Greg's team around 3 months ago. While talking to a friend about the job, I mentioned working for Lisa. When he asked for her full name, we realized we had a mutual friend, and he asked me to watch out for Lisa as a favor. At first, everything was great. I was warmly welcomed to the team. It didn't take long to find out why, he started. About 2 months in, Lisa approached me. She's extremely attractive and persuasive. When I asked her about her ring, she just smiled and told me you were okay with it. I wasn't, and I said so. That started the deep freeze after I turned her down, the man explained. I got all the lousy assignments and constant grief from Greg, the stranger continued. I called our mutual friend back and told him about Lisa approaching me. He told me about you and said that pimping your wife for pay seemed out of character for the man he knew. He believed there was more to it than Lisa let on, and that you needed to know. Greg sent me the picture when they were trying to recruit me into their scheme. It was supposed to be a prize I could expect if I went along. Let's just say I didn't agree with their methods. I resigned yesterday and sent you the text. Our friend? Mike asked. Troy Baker, he replied. If I hadn't met Troy, well, let's just say he helped me out of a tough spot when I was a green lieutenant. I owe him a favor or two. Don't we both? Mike agreed. What are you going to do now? Art pretty much laid it all out for me. I could get the cops involved, and yes, Bill, Greg, and even Lisa would face legal problems, but with his lawyers, it would end up as a minor inconvenience. We made a deal. You might think I'm selling out, and maybe you're right, but they stole the only thing I had that was irreplaceable. If I can't make them pay legally, I'll make them pay another way. It won't bring Lisa back, but I think I'll find she's less irreplaceable than I thought. I have a trip planned. Tell Troy thanks for everything. I won't be going back to work. What about you? Mike asked finally. Well, Troy always spoke highly of Baxter Inc. Now that you're gone, they might need another engineer. I think you'll find they do business a bit differently at Baxtermore to your liking. Challenging, but the fringe benefits won't compare to what Lisa's team was offering. Mike smiled, accepting the arrangement. The stranger stood up, prompting Mike to do the same. With a simple nod to each other, they left without exchanging any further words. Fast forward to Monday, Mike had just completed the check-in process for his flight to Costa Rica. As he contemplated the upcoming relaxation in Tamarindo, he headed toward security. Spotting a mailbox, he pulled out an envelope from his pocket addressed to the DOJ in Washington, D.C. It contained a thumb drive with the recording. He thought it might pique their interest, considering the possibility that Art's legal team might not be as formidable as assumed. Mike dropped the envelope into the box before proceeding to the security line. 9 months later, seated at his usual table in the cafe, Mike received his mail from Anna, who brought him his cerveza. "Thank you, dear," he said, raising the bottle to his lips. Holding the envelope, he wondered who had found him. Not going to great lengths to stay hidden, finding him in a little town on the Pacific coast of northern Costa Rica would have required resources beyond the ordinary person's reach. His first thought was that Art's people had found him. Letting the envelope sit at his house for 2 days, he was fairly certain it wasn't a bomb. Still, you can't be too careful. "Carlos," Mike called out to the cafe owner. "Te importa?" "Sí, señor," Carlos replied. Mike handed over the envelope and stepped back a few paces, thinking, "You can never be too careful." Carlos cut open the envelope and handed it to Mike. "Gracias," Mike said, taking another pull from his beer bottle. He turned the envelope over and several sheets of paper fell onto the table. Picking up a note, it read, "Thought you would find this interesting," along with a phone number. Troy, Mike thought. Only Troy would have the resources to find him. He could live with that. Flipping over another piece of paper, he found a copy of a newspaper article with a picture. The photo depicted Greg, Bill, Lisa, and Rachel being led out of the CR building in handcuffs. The headline read, "4 indicted in multi-million-dollar procurement fraud." Mike smiled. Maybe Art's lawyers aren't everything they were cracked up to be, he said to himself, a habit he had picked up since his Spanish was weak and English wasn't widely spoken. He liked to hear English conversation, even if it was just him talking to himself. "Ana, otra cerveza," he said, holding up his empty bottle. "Sí, señor, gracias," Ana replied as she brought him another beer. Mike took a swallow and looked out at the deep blue Pacific, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Lisa, he thought, letting the name drift away with the ocean breeze.